club takes pleasure in attracting a stellar list of speakers that address today's most relevant issues. The club's place as a refuge for rich discussion and networking has never wavered after 123 seasons.
We are dedicated to encouraging debate on the issues that matter to this city, this province, and this country.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts, and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. My name is Anita McCuitt, and I'm president of Canadian Club Toronto and National TMT and Consumer Markets Leader for PwC Canada. Today, we're thrilled to host Dany Assaf to discuss his newly released book. Dany grew up in Edmonton, where he played hockey and dreamed of the NHL, a life familiar to any Canadian kid. But after the tragedy of 9/11, despite generations of family history in Alberta, he and his family were branded as Muslim terrorists, the other to be feared and shunned. Dany's memoir offers a blueprint for hope that seeks to reclaim the soul and spirit of what has made Canada unique. Before we hear from our speaker, here's some information about how to participate with us. The click here to switch stream button helps if you find that your internet is slow. The audio quality should stay strong. You may find the video quality reduces a bit. Once you click the questions tab, you'll be able to submit your questions right to our moderator. And we do want your questions today, so keep them coming. Thank you to today's event sponsor, Omers and Tories. The Canadian Club is a nonprofit, and we've been gathering people together for 124 years, and it's because of our sponsors that we are able to do that. Now, to introduce today's speaker. Dany Assaf is the author of Say Please and Thank You and Stand in Line, one man's story of what makes Canada special and how to keep it that way. Dany is also a partner with Tories and is an honored past president of Canadian Club Toronto. Today, Dany will be joined in conversation by Farah Nasser, anchor for Global News. One of the club's traditions that has not changed in this virtual world is a toast we make to our country at the start of every event. So if you have a beverage nearby, please join me in a toast to Canada. To Canada.
To Canada.
Canada. Farah, I will turn the Canadian Club podium over to you.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. And Dany, I am so excited to speak with you. I just finished the book last night. It's refreshing. It's wonderfully written, and you can go through it so quickly, which is really helpful these days. So I guess maybe we should start with the title. Tell me about the title. Where did it come from?
Well, first, I just want to say thank you to everybody for making time this afternoon to be with us. As busy as everybody is, it's humbling for me, and it's such an honor, even having served as president of the Canadian Club, to now be the subject of an event. And I can't thank everybody enough for taking interest like yourself in this book and making time this afternoon. So firstly, thank you to all. The title is a very special phrase that was shared with my father over 60 years ago by the son of Lebanese immigrants who came to Alberta in the early 1900s to chart a new life for them and generations to come. And my great-grandfather came in the 20s, but my father came in the 60s. And he was welcomed by a very vibrant Muslim community, many from Lebanon, who had thrived and been embraced in Canada and Alberta. And a beautiful gentleman. His name is Munir Hamdan. Still lives in Edmonton at a vibrant 94 years old and has the spirit that still embodies that youthful spirit. And he said to my father, I know we come from a proud heritage, the Lebanese heritage we're proud of, and we value that and we protect it. But something to keep in mind in this great country in Canada, in order to thrive and to succeed, is that here we all say please and thank you and stand in line. And that advice is golden in its practical utility. If we all do that, life is much more organized and civilized and polite. But those words also have a poetic element to them, because it says you're in a country where you respect and you expect to be respected. And there is a fundamental equality in that creed that stands and has stood the test of time, and fundamentally stands for something even bigger, which I've talked about and write about, is that this is a country where every child can live their potential. And it is a country where who you are will never determine what you can be. And that's why that phrase was so special to me, and why I used it in the title of the book.
One thing that really strikes me about the book is it really teaches you about a facet of history that we don't talk about in schools, or even, with friends or colleagues, and that is the history of Muslims in this country. I mean, I personally learned a lot about the journey. Give us a bit of a synopsis on that, and also how your family came here.
So it's a story that is unique in that it's the Muslim Canadian experience that a lot of people aren't familiar with. And obviously growing up with it and living with it, it was part of life. And, you live in a bubble and you think everybody would know. And then as you progress through life, you realize maybe that story isn't well known, and it's worth telling. And I think for all of us, there's a lesson in there that we have stories, we have experiences. They are worth telling in any way, in anywhere, in any place, because they fundamentally reaffirm who we are. And they strengthen that, and they help embolden us against voices and powers that want to detract from that or want to pit us against one another. So this story, while it's unique, I think there is so much commonality in that journey of coming to Canada, what it represented to so many people. And this story has some really interesting elements to it, which I read about, which is firstly, just the chance of how people came to Canada and Alberta. And, there's stories about these villagers in Lebanon, where my family's originally from, these simple Mediterranean villages, olives and figs and all the things you would imagine, taking their vegetables and fruits to sell in this ancient port city of Beirut. And of course, you couldn't come and go as quickly as you can today, and they would have to spend the night, and they would talk to the folks on the ships, and they would tell stories where they came, and they saw something in Italy, they saw something in France, and they say there were stories of the gold rush that came back to these places like Beirut, talking about the riches to be found in Canada, in the Yukon, whatever way it was described. And that attracted these people to come. Of course, when they got here, there was no gold, there was no rush, there was nothing. There was cold winter, but there was the warmth of the beauty of what Canada offered. And they found a way. They found a way to strive, to thrive, and they became merchants. They were in the fur trade. They traded with the Indigenous peoples. They learned the languages of their Indigenous neighbors and friends. These are people who came. I don't know what their education would have even been in Arabic, their native language. But they came, not only did they learn English, but they said, if we're going to, again, thrive here, and we want to work here, and we want to work in the things that are important in our community and around us, then reach out to the people, know who they are, and to the point that they learned their languages. So that story is fascinating in and of itself. And then it culminates years later, not that long, in the Depression, where people of all faiths, Christian, Jewish, of all social classes, come together behind building a mosque for these early immigrants in Canada, which is the first mosque in Canada and it's in Edmonton, Alberta, and it was championed by incredibly strong Muslim women. One of them, her name is Hilwi Hamdan, who happens to be Munir Hamdan, the man who shared that advice with my father. It's his mother who leads the charge, starting with the mayor of Edmonton at that time, saying, this has to happen. In the Depression, and it was such a priority for everybody, they actually made it a reality. That is an incredible Canadian story that no one can take away from us and genuinely defines who we are, and something we've got to reclaim and retell whenever we get a little uncertain and the future looks a little bit shaky. We can draw back on that. And that is the strength of this country, and it's reflected in my story and many similar stories across this great land.
I love that it was a woman, a Muslim woman at that. I mean, the courage that it must have taken at that time for her to, speak to people and say that this is what's needed. I can't even imagine. So it seems like your family was received quite well by Canadians, and that was a long time ago. Things changed quite a bit in your lifetime. Talk to me about when you felt things changed.
Well, really, it was 9/11. And it was this horrific, terrible attack that took the lives of thousands of innocent people. And it's inexplicable. I mean, people can talk about politics, but it's inexplicable when humans decide to do that to one another. And of course, it isn't the first instance of that. And unfortunately, our history books are filled with, unfortunately, people who claim to act in every religion or every race doing something horrific to other humans. But this was no exception. It was horror to all of us. And it was an attack on all of us. But yet, I guess we naturally look to find an answer to explain the inexplicable. And we generalize and we scapegoat, and people want to create a narrative to simplify their understanding. We can all succumb to that. So that's what we have to resist. And when that happened, I joke, it took a lot. People would talk about the other, and you'd see the other, and I joke, I'm like, for a long time, I was like, who are they talking about? And I would look around and see, is there somebody here I don't know? And at a certain point, I'm like, I want him too. Like, let's go get him. And then I realized they could be talking about me. And then you realize they could be talking about any one of us. And as I joke, I say, as a child growing up in Alberta, when people ask me, what do you do? I describe myself as a failed hockey player who became a lawyer. I never imagined I would spend my adult years talking about how me and my family could be the other. I thought I would be doing something more productive in my life, but maybe it's fate that we have to come together and find ways to retell our story. And I saw it in so many different ways. And in particular, being a lawyer, I saw it in how we were going to change our laws and basically make it easier to prosecute people and to put people in jail as a response to that. And then you think, well, what are we becoming? And there's a great line, I think it's in a U2 song or something, I don't know. It says, don't become a monster to fight a monster. And that's what we have to resist. It cannot redefine us. And we must always find ways to protect our unity and our strength. And if one of us can be othered, any one of us can be othered, because there is something in every one of us that somebody could focus in on and to marginalize. And we see it everywhere. And the communists, and I put this in the book, they had a great saying. It said, find me the man and leave it to me. I will find you the crime. And that's why, as a lawyer, it was so important to work with no-fly kids on the no-fly list, or to go up to Ottawa and meet with ministers. And maybe it didn't have an impact, or did, or I don't know, but it was to make sure that conversation was live, to ultimately come back to that most important point, which is every child in this country should be able to dream. From the day they are born, they can dream unlimited potential. It's good for them, it's good for us. And when we don't include, God knows what we are missing out on.
You say that every child has potential, and that every child should have be able to achieve that potential. And we know that in a way, part of that is not true with what we saw with the 215 Indigenous children that were found, or the unmarked graves that were found in Kamloops, BC. And in your chapter on immigration, you say the seeds were planted in terms of acceptance with immigration with the British North America Act when the country was founded in 1867. But you also say the accommodation of Indigenous people took a much different and tragic course. What do you think was the difference?
The difference was in establishing a nation, and we see this throughout history, of how do the new immigrants and the new people who settle work with the Indigenous populations. And there is a spectrum of horror. I don't think any of it was ever done right. And we see it to this day. I don't think it's ever been done perfectly. And all we can try to do is, as humans, learn from past experience to mitigate and minimize the damage and the destruction that's done. Like those 215 kids and many more. Who knows what they could have offered Canada and the world? We'll never know. They were taken from us because of an idea. Again, we don't have to argue about the motives. People can say they had this, they had that, whatever it is. But just at a fundamental level, the idea that after millennia of human history and the structure of the family and the efficiency and the general effectiveness of how parents can raise children, that we as humans think we're going to manufacture another model that's better. We're going to take children from their parents and put them in another school because they're going to be better off. I mean, it's misguided. At best, it's misguided. Where was that going to lead? It was going to lead to bad places. And when we look at it now, today, that's the lessons. We have to take those lessons and think of how, when we include others and what we think, and we move away from this idea of minimal tolerance to what I think Canada really is. We sell ourselves short. My family experienced acceptance over 100 years ago, not tolerance. It was acceptance. And we take those lessons in the past and we apply them today. The people who did most of those, they're gone. There's nobody to quote unquote punish. And there is energy in all our anger. There is some energy in that, but there's much more power in forgiveness. And as we chart a path ahead, what do we do with all of that? And that is a common cause to continue to perfect this great country and what we have. We've got a lot to improve, but we sure have a lot to work with. And that's what we all are interested in. And coming together like this is a way to reaffirm that and to continue that conversation.
You know, we interviewed a woman with the Kamloops Tishwetmik First Nation in Kamloops, and she said, you know, it was residential schools then. Right now, it's the foster care system. Children are still being taken away from their parents. Indigenous children. There's layers of multi-generational trauma. What do you think is the future here when it comes to you know, Indigenous people, but also, you know, the racial reckoning we had last year with Black Canadians? You know, last night a statue was taken down of Egerton Ryerson at the university that holds its name. His name. There was a monument of Sir John A. Macdonald taken down in Charlottetown 6 days ago. Is taking down these monuments? Is it and having these difficult conversations? Is it erasing history or is it making history to you?
Well, you know, there's a lot of interesting pieces to your question. The first is, and I say this in the book, I say we don't need to burn down our history to build our future. And to reach for that future, you have to respect the past, both good and bad. And in terms of how we recognize one another, I think there's another maybe observation in there, which is we need to recognize contribution and not worship people. So that we can say, within a moment, somebody planted a rose. That rose is objectively beautiful or good. It's not to sit here and say we've looked in the soul of one another and judged one another and said that for all time we will worship that personality. So I think it is exposing the weaknesses in that. So we can look back and say people made contribution and they were imperfect or maybe worse. And we don't have to worship or celebrate the entire personality, but Canada exists today as imperfect as it is because someone did something. There are 200 nations or plus in the world, and it's a pretty good place. So spoiler alert, My book is called Why Canada is Special and How to Keep It That Way. I believe in Canada. It is an extraordinary place amongst this imperfection of humanity. So again, I look at this a little bit, and I talk about it in this book. A lot of things I look at through my own weight of being a competition lawyer, for example. And I think of why things play out that way, and markets and the dynamics that are out there. And when I look at what we try to do as people together, and I think, what is my expectation? My expectation is we are born with goodness. We know we lie, we steal. Why? We're born. We know that's something's off. When I did that, why did I feel bad? So we're kind of wired for that, but life can take us in different, all of us. And God forgive me for the things I've done wrong today. Forget about tomorrow, just today. And we all strive to do better. But when we think about this endeavor, it is chaotic. And there are many people and many ideas. And we as humans, we try to bring organization to chaos. It's not starting from perfection. So it's a constant effort for us to say, we saw this, it was good, improve on that, build on that, to perfect what we have. And that is the job of every generation, to take what we got and to try to give better to folks in the future, and obviously our children and our grandchildren. So when we look back, I think those perspectives are important, and to avoid these ultimate sectarian kinds of divisions. Because go to Lebanon, the place of my heritage. Talk about a place that went from beauty to ugliness. This is what happens when we go too far in defining ourselves by our sex or where we come from, because we lose that point of commonality, which is ultimately we all want to be judged on the basis of our merit. Whether I'm white, I'm black, I'm brown, I'm green, purple, yellow, it doesn't matter what. Look at me for who I am. Look in my eyes and look at me for who I am and what I can offer. That is fundamentally the thing that will unite us. And the energy and the potential of all of us to be able to be included in this, there's the power. And then we could talk about this later. And especially today, for a country like Canada, we mourn and we have anger. It's normal. We'll cry those tears. We will, for all of our brothers and sisters of any background, Black, white, Indigenous, but we got to harness that energy, bring everybody in. Technology is making it easier than ever. If we can figure out a way to plug that in, and then that future that we all want will be the best and the brightest yet.
One theme that you talk about a lot is this idea of forgiveness. And I was going to save the Q&A questions till the end, but there's a really good one. There's a good one that's really to do with what we're talking about.
Sure.
It's so poignant. How do we move on when people trespass against us? Did you forgive the neighbors that vandalized your home? Forgiveness is easy to say, but it's really hard to do.
I did. Our whole family did. We did forgive it and move on, because we recognized it for what it is. It will not define us. It will not define a century of lived experience and the potential of the future. Where does it take us? So I recognized what it was. And this great country gave me an avenue to participate. Again, I don't know what impact I have or will have or don't have. It doesn't matter. I had a voice, and I was able to go up and meet with our leaders and to say my piece. And we can all have that opportunity to do it and try to just nudge that conversation a little different in the future. And it takes a while. But without forgiveness, we live in the past. We live in the past. And it's kind of, you come back to law and you think of, there's a lot of grievance. People come. I don't practice litigation. I thought I wanted to be like Perry Mason. I'm old, so I thought you go up there and you're winning the case and all that stuff. I got that real. It was a little bit different, not that exciting as it portrayed on TV. But I've had a rich and incredible legal experience, and I want to thank my partners at Tories and other places who have given me all these opportunities. But if we think of a case, somebody brings to you, I've been aggrieved, somebody unjustly fired me, or somebody. I was defrauded. And I used to tell people, because still people call you as a lawyer for advice. And I say, seek your redress. Seek your justice. Don't give up. But don't make it your life goal. Because you know what no one is ever going to give you back? Your life. Mm-hmm. So you spend 10 years litigating that case, the clock ticks against you. The world will move on. And a lot of times that's the insurance companies and law firms, they will litigate, they will all move on. People will come in and out of your file, but no one's going to step back in your shoes and live your life and give you the time back. So from here on in, pretend like it doesn't exist in the sense of what tomorrow may bring me. Use it as gasoline in your tank to energize you and to show and prove who you are. But you don't have to forget, and you don't have to stop seeking the justice you deserve. It's to put those things back in balance so that, again, it comes back to making the most of your own life. And that is across the board for all of us. And that's hopefully where we can find that balance to redress, to respect, and to fix, and all of us to work together for an even better future.
Somebody's asking here about, the grief that comes along with racism too. Like, how do you work through that? How do you work through, it's not just the vandalism in your home. It's, there's a story you tell about the Globe and Mail, and maybe you can retell that as well. And also, Bill C-51, there's just so many things that have happened in your life. It builds, right? And the grief must build. How do you work through that personally?
Like all of us, you start with basics. Firstly, going to bed crying is just a terrible way. We could all go to bed crying every night. I don't want to go to bed crying. I cry sometimes. There are things that are horrible, but I want to go to bed thinking of a better tomorrow. It just makes it more fun to wake up every day, no matter who we are. And what motivates me? And we're all subject to this. We all fight this every single day. That I wake up in the morning and I'm motivated by anger at the other. That's the best thing that I have. It means I don't have a lot of positive to look forward to in how I defined my day. Anger at the other is almost hopeless to me. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, again, I look at things again I try to explain things from, again, kind of markets and competition. And I think, the world is competitive too. And people are naturally competitive. And we'll talk about what that means in the future too. So there is a portion of it that I try to depersonalize. And I say it's a competitive world. And people will try to win a race in a moment. And they will say things about you. And it doesn't matter what color you are, how tall you are, how, good looking you are or not, or whatever it is, people will find something to try to take an advantage and win a race. So I try to depersonalize a lot of it. And then there are a certain group of people who are angry and hate. And of course it upsets me. But then I also feel sympathy for them in the following senses. Somebody who hates irrationally, like I get up, I hate all Muslims. There's almost 2 billion. Like, it's irrational. It's irrational. What it tells me is it's highly unlikely that person goes home and likes anything. Like, what would they like? They go home and they like what? Like, when you're irrational in hate in one thing, it's probably going to be across the board. And those people, hopefully, don't ruin it for the rest of us. Number one, if you want to feel like that. And secondly, if you want to open your ears and engage, that anger is not going to bring you your peace and your prosperity. Trust us. It isn't going to make you richer, and it isn't going to make tomorrow any brighter.
Something I think a lot of people struggle with, and I personally do, is, there are people on either extreme, right? We know that. But the people who are kind of, and that you're not going to reach, and there's no way, you can't, it's not even worth engaging. But the people who are not in the extreme, how do you kind of engage these type of conversations, especially when it's starting from such a fractured point of view? We talk even about what's happened in the Middle East recently. Like, it's just, you start off at a point of difficulty, of anger, and so how do you have those difficult conversations? Because I'm sure you do.
So my first answer is, I don't know. We experiment, and we experiment coming from logic and reaching into something good. I don't know. So the logic is, whether you want to apply it to the Middle East or anywhere, the logic tells you there are peoples who have a common connection and a shared existence on this land. So what's going to happen? So you can be anyone from either side, master tactician. I move a chess piece here, I put this here, I do this here. Go ahead. Where is it going to end? Nobody is going anywhere. And then the second thing is, there's beauty in all of these peoples. There's beauty in all of these peoples. There is incredible beauty and richness in the Palestinian people, and the charm and the life of their culture. And there is beauty and richness and charm and in the life of the Jewish culture. That is what we want to reach into, to get back to not some fairy tale, to solve a logical problem and question. And that is where you try to come around and say, what fundamentally is in our mutual interest and what fundamentally is going to dictate the outcome. And we could start that conversation with almost anything if we look at one another like that. What do we all want? We all want our kids of any background to be able to dream and to live the life of their potential. How do we set up a system so that everybody can do that? And at one point, we reach for this North Star of a genuine meritocracy, where we avoid all of this sectarian identification. And we realize today, we say tribalism is a form of survival. What are you talking about? But in today's world, to ask ourselves, isn't it that humanity is our tribe? And that is what I think will help take us to somewhere where we can find that mutual interest and bring us to a more prosperous and peaceful future.
And I guess come to it with a sense of humility as well, right? Like not thinking you know everything, kind of being a don't know it all, right?
We know about this much. Mm-hmm. We dip our toe into something and we try to listen and learn. I don't know how to listen, but my kids taught me how to do it. So I'm a little bit better than I used to be, just a touch better than I was.
Just ask your wife about that too.
And talk about humility. I always joke, I say, that's the beauty about family or loved people or friends or whomever is around you who care for you, is they remind you who you are. So it was brought home to me once I came home. I can't remember what happened. It was something really big. Like I got something, I don't know what happened. And I was in my suit, my tie, everything. And I was so excited to tell everybody at home about it, to tell Lisa about it, the kids. Literally, as I opened the door, my little daughter, Hannah, comes up to me and says, Daddy, please help me. I said, what, sweetheart? She said, I lost Barbie's shoe. I'm like, excuse me? So agenda shift, we lost Barbie's shoe. So reorganize your priorities, big guy. And big shoe, everybody knows your Barbie shoe is that big. Barbie shoe is about that big. Just the metaphor of it, okay? That big. And where's Barbie shoe? In the back of our family SUV, which is massive. So now I'm in my suit and in my tie. There are fries down there. There's an old burger. I don't know what's back there where the guys can't get to when they're cleaning the thing. To what? Find Barbie's shoe. And you know what? We found Barbie's shoe. We put it back on Barbie, and I never told my story. And to this day, I can't even remember what it is.
What a brilliant juxtaposition.
Yeah. It was. From being at the top about something big, I was literally on my hands and knees looking for something tiny.
Yeah. Kids have a way of doing that, eh? Yeah.
By the way, I still have been wanting to tell my stories, but I pause now. That's all. I pause. Is anything else going on? And then the Golden Mail, we could talk about that and getting over that. And I got up and like everybody, it's Father's Day. It was a sunny day. I go outside on the porch. I'm having my coffee, my breakfast, enjoying. I open up my favorite, my friend. That's my friend, the Globe and Mail. My favorite newspaper. I look forward to Saturday mornings. Back then, you open up the paper, the physical paper, and I'm turning the pages, and it's like somebody literally slapped me across the face. There's a cartoon of an Arab man, and their child is giving them a suicide belt for Father's Day. There's no commentary, even to the extent you could try to portray it as something. It's like, that's how these people live. And I'm like, how could any person, even in jest, just imagine that that's true? So, of course, in the great Canadian way, I demand a meeting. I want a meeting. And you know what? To the Globe and Mail's credit, whom I've made peace with, and they're fantastic people then and now, but it was one of these episodes where we learned from one another, and they said you can have a meeting. And then I brought some other folks with us, and we went and we had a big meeting. A fantastic opportunity to air the grievances. But how am I going to explain this? So as I'm leaving my office, I literally look up at the last second. I see this picture of my children. We have 4. At the time, we had 2. Mohammed and Dany. And they're like 3 or 4. They have the sunglasses on. I don't know what. We took the picture. And the sunlight is dancing through their hair. And, of course, they're my kids, so they're gorgeous. So I say, I'm going to take this picture. I don't know if I broke the frame. I couldn't get it out. I put the picture in my briefcase, and I ran to this meeting. And I thought, I'm going to try to convey how absurd this is. So I pulled that picture out of my briefcase, and I put it like this, like a Frisbee, and I flung it across the table. And I said, I want the answer to one question. Out of those 2 kids, which one do you imagine giving me a suicide belt for Father's Day? And that was it. We talked for a while, and things went, and people said stuff. I don't know what.
You made your point.
I made my point. And to their credit, they changed their policy with cartoons. They would be context and so on. And then I joke, the only people worse than lawyers trying to apologize, I'm sorry, Farah, our media. We suffer from a common ailment.
I agree. Yeah.
I got a chance to tell my story, my piece, and build new friendships and move on and forgive and try to turn it into something a little bit better.
I'm gonna bring that to a question of you, another viewer question that came in. What do you think is the most common misconception about Islam that people have about Islam, and what would surprise people about Islam?
That's a great question. So the most common misconception is that it's inherently violent religion. It really, that is one. I've seen. There's things you hear every day. I played hockey in northern Alberta. I got hit a lot. There's a guy with a very thick skin, so it all flies off. That one really is painful to hear because to me, Islam represents beauty. And it's not unique in that. Many faiths, great faiths, represent beauty. But Islam is part of that tradition of beauty. The other part that bothers me is because it really cuts at the core of what I feel Islam is about, which again is common to many religions, but also found in Islam and is a priority in our faith, which is a very simple message, which is as a Muslim to live life to serve others, which again, so many religions, so many people, secular or otherwise, to serve. It's about service. You want to worship God, serve humanity. And that at its core, what it means to me, that message is, are you hungry? Are you tired? Are you sad? Are you sick? Then find a Muslim person. They will help you. They won't ask who you are, who you love, where you come from, what your creed is. Find a Muslim. They will help you. That's why that hurts so much to hear that misconception. And then the second thing is the biggest misconception, is the treatment of women. Mm-hmm. Because for me, Islam represented a change in how women were perceived. You read the Quran, it says, it speaks to men and women directly with the pronouns, and it gave women the right to keep their name and to property. And we continue to see that misconception out there. And I think while no culture is perfect, and the Arab culture has had and continues to have so many issues with empowering women, and we see the price that society is paying. Take a look at the lack of progress in Arab countries economically and otherwise. They have excluded women for so long. It's changing. So not only the morality of it, but also the harm, the actual physical harm that it brings to women and their communities. And that, for me, is one of the things that I want people to see and to appreciate is we are part of that journey as Muslims in empowering women and making sure they are shoulder to shoulder with us in every aspect of our lives. And I wouldn't be anywhere, obviously, without the women in my life. That is just a matter of fact. A matter of fact, I would never be where I am.
Let's zoom out a bit, because I think, after the pandemic and its political fallout and, again, the racial reckoning that I mentioned last year, I think it's fair to say that some extremes have gone even further. We have an election that political parties are preparing for that could happen this year. When we think about that, we think about what's happened in the States, how far it went, 4 years ago and within the past 4 years or 5 years. Are you concerned about populism here and anti-Muslim sentiment here?
Yes, because, again, back to what is happening around us. Anxiety, uncertainty, economic, technological transformation. Social media that is powerful and good in so many ways, but has excesses, and I write a chapter in that book, and where those forces of uncertainty and fear can dominate and define and make us look backwards. And to say, how we're going to deal with this is we are going to circle the wagons. We're going to look to the past, to some simpler time, whatever that is, when things were good, and that is going to bring me my peace and prosperity. And false prophets who will sell that. And by the way, this is not unique to America. It's not unique to anyone. We have seen this throughout time where people exploit that. Mm-hmm. And we look ahead and we say, that is just, as a matter of fact, firstly, it's illogical. Technology, travel, the environment, security. Who is an island today? Who is an island? Let's get very specific. My personal prosperity of those and my children. Where am I going to seek it? Do I know who my next customer is going to be? Who my next supplier is going to be? Who my next employee is going to be? Or who my next employer is going to be? Who's going to be signing my paycheck, if not mine, the paycheck of my children? Make a friend. We are potential allies, not certain enemies. That is probably the better thing to bet on to bring me my peace and prosperity than looking back and hoping for like a car factory to open again. So it's the logic of that, and it's the reality that we live, and creating and telling our stories again, but reinventing them for this age. So social media, again, I read about that in the book. When radio came, I used that little analogy, War of the Worlds. Orson Welles came on, and people thought we were being invaded by aliens. It's just a story to show the power of these media. But we learned to deal with it. We learned through laws and regulation to create boundaries. I mean, cars are great, but you can't drive 200 kilometers an hour. It's okay. We're not saying it's bad, but there are limits because we can hurt one another. There's an old saying, your rights end where my nose begins. This is normal because if you go too far, no one has any rights. That's the law of the jungle. So with social media, we've got to figure that out. Don't let these voices define us, even if they're loud and intense. And in addition to that, we talk about evolution. In every age, you learn something to to adapt to your life. So, in old times, you learned about, if you smelt something bad, don't eat it. It's bad for you. If you see a bear, run. Bad to be caught by the bear. And social media, we need to develop a sense of what is good and what is bad at the end of the day too. Just like those things. That's bad for me. I know myself. Not to see, not to hear, not to believe everything I see and hear. Is that genuinely who we are? Does that represent my story, the predominant story of my family experience in Canada? No. So I'm not going to get in a moment, like in a bar fight, where we all erupt in anger, and then afterwards we live with regret and are picking up the pieces. So that anger is normal. That uncertainty is normal. It's what do we do with it? And that's where we come back to the things that we share in common. And for me personally, we have spent so many years studying difference. I honestly feel like I'm an expert in difference. Because we hear, I got a PhD in difference. For the fun of it, I want to re-engage in the study of sameness. I want to get a PhD in that too. And I want to talk about that. Because when you layer that on top of what technology and how the world works, there's a clearer line to our peace and prosperity than looking backwards into a darker place.
A question just came in that I think is interesting because we're adults, and when we look at social media, we look at it in a certain way. So this kind of has to do with that lens, but how have you raised your kids to be proud of their culture here in Canada and to have these kind of two identities from where you came from and now?
Well, firstly, coming back to the title of my book, saying please, thank you, and stand in line, in addition to everything else, is a really inclusive membership criteria. Everybody can do that. No one has to compromise their religion. No one has to compromise their heritage. No one has to compromise anything to do that. So again, as a competition lawyer, we're looking at barriers to entry. I'm creating a club and I want it to be the most inclusive. Don't make the rules too hard, but make them meaningful. Easy, but meaningful. So Canada, the membership criteria is pretty simple in my mind. Say please, thank you, and stand in line. And all that means, and you can be Canadian. So it is this model, its beauty is, it honestly gives you the opportunity to have it all, or as much of all as possible on this place called Earth, amongst the chaos and the beauty of humanity. So that's what we teach. That's what we try to instill in our kids. Nothing complicated. What was shared with us, we just try to pass it on. Honestly, not even anything elaborate. These are the things that we were taught. These are the things that we observed. These are the things that brought beauty to life. So we'll try to share them. And God forgive us for our shortcomings. And they are proud of their heritage. Canada, we practice our faith and we want to keep it that way, speaking of keeping it that way. And yet Canada's embrace is big enough for every single one of us. And most of our history is a testament to that.
I have about 20 more questions, and there's about 20 questions that I'm getting in, and I unfortunately can't get to everything. And I know we're running out of time. We could do this all day, but let me close off with this, because this has been kind of a theme in the questions that have come in. What did you learn about yourself writing this book? I mean, what inspired it? What did you learn about yourself? And I'll throw you don't usually do this as a journalist, ask a double barrel question, but I will. Right. What's the best piece of advice you've gotten as well? So I'll throw all that to you as we have only a few minutes left.
Well, firstly, why did I write this book? I wrote that book, I think, because like all of us, when you see something you love under kind of threat or strain, you want to do something. It's natural. So we share the love of this country. I know I just joke. We share in our hardiness. We share in our love of hockey, and we also share in the hip. And we all kind of choke up when we think of Gord Downie's early demise, because he was our poet in so many ways of what Canada is. We share these things. And for me, those efforts are powerful to protect what we love, to tell our stories, to engage, to have conversations like you making time and all these beautiful people who have logged in here. That's why I wrote the book. What did I learn about myself? I learned that, and it strengthened in me, which is still always a work in progress, the power of forgiveness. Because when I look back on all my experiences and people ask me, say, why aren't you bitter? Why aren't you angry? I actually don't really know the answer to that question 100%. I don't. But I look back and I say, wow, like you did get a chance from nothing. I came from Edmonton. Like I say, I'm a failed hockey player who became a lawyer. I got involved. I had a conversation here or there, and I was participating. So I have some responsibility for if something isn't actually perfect. Like, well, not that I have anything like an outcome. I'm not entitled to any outcome. Zero outcomes. I'm entitled to no outcome at all, but it's beautiful to be in a place where you can participate. And I look back and I say, what do I have to be bitter about there? The things, the good and bad that I've seen, I had a shot. And that's ultimately what we all want to protect for our kids. The markets don't offer you an outcome. We used to call it the American dream. You know, it was a euphemism for the fact that you could get up every day and think anything is possible. And I was always struck, and I think I wrote this in the book about the power of that American dream. And there's a great story about one time the Smithsonian they accepted into their archives this movie, a home movie of someone of their vacation in the 50s in California, in this Disneyland, in California. And the article said, well, why was it accepted? Because it epitomized that dream where a middle-class family to take their children on a vacation, firstly, and enjoy that time together, and go to a place called Disneyland that represented beauty and hope and love without irony. There are not a lot of places in the world where you could do that without irony. Mm-hmm. Canada is one of those places too. And fundamentally, that, for me, when I look back and I say, keeping that dream alive so that no kid thinks ever the following thought, that is not for me. Mm-hmm. I can't be a lawyer, it's not for me. I can't be a prime minister, that's not for me. For me, that is the biggest crime that we could commit in our time, is that there are children somewhere out here, born in this country, who get up in the morning and say, Mommy, Daddy, I'd love to do that. Or their parents tell them, son or daughter, it's not for us, it's not for you. And that fundamentally is what it's all about. And I've gotten lots of great advice. It's hard to categorize them. One was, holy man, your title is really long. I feel like I don't need to read the book anymore. So shorten the title. But, these things stay with you. And these conversations are really what it was all about. And again, I can't thank you, Farah, you and my colleagues, Anita and Colleen and everyone at the Canadian Club and everybody joining us today for taking a meaningful part of their day to spend with us to talk about this book and our great country.
Maybe you can leave us all with one just last piece of advice. I see Anita might be wrapping me.
Yes.
But can I just ask one more question? Yeah, I just think, we're in this situation. Yesterday, even Trump spoke about running again and said, again with this like dog whistle on immigration. What advice could you give us to insulate our country from the hate that's out there as we approach an election, as we are so close to our U.S. neighbors and the world is about to open again? What piece of advice could you leave us with?
Firstly, to recognize this game of politics is largely a game. Okay. And to not take it seriously and to not let it define us. And I have a lot of respect for people who commit their lives to public service. And I have a lot of respect for what they have done and what they continue to do for us day to day. We need to think about how we make it better. And to remember a piece of advice that was given to me about elections. And they always said, we look for leadership in times of election. And somebody once told me, a lot of times people are looking for a parade to get in the front of. So we're the parade. And ultimately, we can shape and the contours of that conversation and make it about something meaningful. And then those political leaders will follow. At the end of the day, we have a role in that.
Your optimism, your spirit, your sense of responsibility, and especially your energy is contagious, Dany. I don't know how you do it, but thank you for this very rich and meaningful conversation. I know I benefited from it personally, and I'm sorry to all of our audience members whose questions I couldn't get in. And I thank you, Canadian Club, for having me as well. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you, Dany.
The pleasure is mine. An honor. Thank you.
Anita, I'll send it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Farah. And I'll echo that. Dany, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your family's story of what makes Canada special to you. Your stories personally really resonated with me, and you really just filled me with hope for the future, which I think we all need a little of that right now for lots of reasons. And we were honored to have you back on the Canadian Club podium once again, a real treat.
My pleasure. Thank you, Anita.
Great. Farah, thank you for joining us again and for your thoughtful guidance of today's conversation.
My pleasure.
Guests, we hope that you'll join us for some of our upcoming events. Tomorrow, we host a panel on the changing landscape for business and entrepreneurship in 2021. Join us for a discussion featuring Guy Cormier of Desjardins Group and a panel of leaders who will have a unique perspective on doing good through business. And on June 10th, we host the CEO of Sun Life, Dean Connor, for his reflections on a decade as CEO and the Canadian insurance industry on a global stage. Thank you again to Omers and Tories for sponsoring today's event. Our events would not be possible without our sponsors, so thank you for your continued generosity. Thank you to our AV supplier, Van Valkenburg Communications and livemeeting.ca for making it possible for us to come together virtually today. Guests, thank you for joining us. Please stay healthy and stay safe.